Okay, we had a most amazing sporting weekend last weekend in which you just literally went from New Zealand sporting triumph to New Zealand sporting triumph. In fact, I'm actually trying to remember over as many sports as there were over a 72-hour period that New Zealand has ever been so successful in my lifetime as that particular period when we won everything from cricket games and cricket tests and world cricket T20s through to spectacular drives at Formula Ones, to netball tests, to underwater hockey for Pete's sake, and then in the midst of that, almost actually blindsided by everything else, was the fact that New Zealand, or Team New Zealand, had regained the America's Cup in Barcelona. And so out of that latter one, obviously that was probably the one that had the most money in it, and certainly beset by billionaires, the extraordinary debate continues as to whether or not it's time to bring the America's Cup home. We're joined by, frankly, just the best economic and financial commentator in this country, Craig Stobo. He's going to talk about that and a lot of other things, and he joins us now. Craig, lovely to see you again, mate. Thanks for joining us a little bit earlier.
Oh, that's a pleasure, Michael. Happy to help out.
Mate, the America's Cup, the economics of... You wanted to talk about that. I'll let you go because I'm interested in what you have to say on this issue.
Thank you, Michael, and listeners. And just button if you want to go through the discussion. So there's been a call for considering asking for the cup holders to hold the next regatta in presumably Auckland, New Zealand. And I cast my mind back to the 2021 AC 36 event. So that was America's Cup 36 in 2021. For those of you who remember it and were there in Auckland, I certainly was. I went out to watch a couple of races. It was fabulous. But a group called ME Consulting, or Market Economics, I think is what it stands for, ME Consulting did some work, pre and post analysis of the 2021 Cup and the impact on New Zealand of financials and non-financials. And they look at it from a cost-benefit analysis. So what were the costs and what were the benefits? And the benefits are the expenditure and the costs of the money put up, et cetera, et cetera. So what they came to as an outcome was that Auckland had a net cost of minus 146 mil, and New Zealand had a net cost of $92 million. In other words, the Cup was a failure financially for Auckland and for New Zealand. Now, prior to that, they built some... Yeah, exactly. So, but bear in mind, this is 2021, so I'll just go through some of the assumptions, because they did some pre-race analysis to inform everybody about whether it's worthwhile bringing the Cup to New Zealand. And they had a cost-benefit positive outcome on the assumptions of between minus 2 million and plus 76. So in other words, it's worth bringing it to New Zealand. But here are the assumptions. This is in 2021. They assumed 8 challenges would arrive. Can you remember how many challenges actually arrived, Michael?
Yeah, was it 3 or 4? Three. Yeah.
There were only 3 turned up. Because New Zealand's a long way. It's a long way from Europe and from North America. They assumed a high level of visitors, in particular internationals. But of course, with our lockdown experiences, international visitors didn't want to come here in case we got locked up again. So the visitor numbers were down. And they assumed $200 million of central and local government support, which included the $40 million host fee, which you had to pay as hosts to the Cup owners. And what happened was, you might remember, Auckland Council decided, I think quite wisely in some respects, to bring forward expenditure down at Wynyard Quarter on the walls and the buildings down there and the old tank farm. And so that 200 mil plus scope creep, of course, that 200 mil blew out to 384 mil. Now, some of that structures are still there, of course, but they're not being used for sailing events, right? So the repurposing of the area has yet to unfold in terms of benefits. So out of all of that, you say to yourself, if you're going to hold the Cup here again, you need to get almost $500 million more of international visitor expenditure to make it worthwhile. And I just don't think it's going to stack up. I think it's not worthwhile. We're better off spending $50 million on a national law and sending New Zealanders to the venue of the next Cup and pay them to stay in a hotel for 2 weeks and clothe them in New Zealand supporters gear, have a huge tent, have huge New Zealand visitors tent, and we just go out and rampage and support our team in that venue. And that way the America's Cup owners, the title holders, can take the highest bid in the marketplace, whether it's Barcelona or Jeddah or whatever it is, get the money they need for the best designers and the best sailors and the best boat, and sail it, and we'll just fly a few Kiwis, call it, I don't know, 10,000 or whatever the number is, in a national lottery, and they can, and the venue overseas can pay for all the infrastructure and all the costs. And we'll have Kiwis there in numbers supporting our business and our teams. And you can get New Zealand Trade Enterprise to set up Expo. All that stuff can happen at a foreign jurisdiction, but it ain't worthwhile bringing it back here.
That is a fascinating and devastating, I have to say, analysis, Craig. I guess from that too, you could, as you've just said at the end there, you could leverage off where that cup is in the middle of Europe. If it stays there for marketing, tourism, and trade purposes. And have a national lottery, and you get to go to a venue for 2 weeks, stay in a hotel, go to the supporters tent, support the crew as they go out in the water, and give the Brits or the Italians, whatever, a hard time. It's great. I guess the pushback against that you'd get from those who want to return it to New Zealand is, that was true in 2021 because we were in the midst of COVID, both nationally and internationally. 2026, I think, is the next one due. That won't have that same stricture. What would you say to that? I mean, the idea that, the international economy might have picked up by then, people have a bit more money, you'll return to the good old days? Or is it just that it's just such an expensive event now anyhow that you're just going to have a diminished number of challenges wherever you are?
If I was Andy Dalton, I'd be looking for the venue that wants to pay the highest host fee. So Auckland will be in a race for payments. Who's going to pay the highest host fee? And bear in mind, a little bit like the All Blacks track record, at some point I think they were the highest performing sports team in the world with 88% track record. This is, I think, before lockdowns, back in the early 2010s. It's a team that was worth backing because of their excellent history. And so you got really good quality global companies like AIG, and, disclosure, I was chairman for a while. AIG paid up to support the All Blacks brand because of that success rate. Our sailing team, not our sailing team, but the team led by Andy Dalton, Grant Dalton, 3 times in a row now, that's pretty successful. So they can command, I think, a higher fee somewhere else. And so you just have to follow the money. And I don't think we're in that race. I really don't.
Sir Ian Taylor, who in actual fact seems to have made, I think, his technology company on the back of the America's Cup, in actual fact, wrote an open letter to the Prime Minister a couple of days ago, in which he said that it's up to Christopher Luxon and this government to do exactly what they did, and that if they can allocate budgets and support in the past to people like Richard Taylor at the Weta Workshop, and provide film subsidies for Lord of the Rings, etc., then they can certainly afford to support this. What's your response to him?
Just see the government structural deficits, the adjustments going on in health and education, and you want to put up, I don't know how much, 100 mil at central and, 50 mil at local, whatever it is. Do you think we really can afford that? Are we sending the right messages around, cutting your cloth to suit circumstances? This is a corporate event at the top end of town. This is not, it's not owned by, it's not a New Zealand government event per se. It's a corporate event with corporates, sailing again. I love sailing. I just absolutely love sailing. I'm a sailor myself. So lots of empathy, but, this is the big end of town. You look at the brands on the sales of Team New Zealand. Great name, so broadcasts around the world, but they're not necessarily identifiable New Zealand brands, are they? They're global brands. And so that's where they're competing. And I think the best outcome is that those guys get paid the most possible amount of money they can get for the designers, the administration, the executives, the sailors, the support crew, they get paid that they possibly can from a venue and the brand sponsors that they can get. And I think that's a good outcome for New Zealand. And as I said, there are other ways of cutting New Zealand support, which is sending some people across to the venue.